in episode 2 of Recovery Talks. We have with us Dr. Shweta Warke. Dr. Shweta Warke is one of the oldest practicing physios around town. She has had a illustrative career of spanning 22 years, and now she has began her own clinical setup in Thane, which is the biggest holistic clinical setup in physiotherapy in Thane, called as Physiokinesis. So we are very lucky to have Dr. Shweta Warke in the second episode of Recovery Talks. How are you, ma'am, today?
Very good. How are you?
All good, all good. How was your day today? Is everything okay? Are you having a good day? Are you having a slow day?
No. I had a good day at the clinic. Saw a couple of patients, did some meetings with my social media team, and then got ready to come here. Yes.
So you have been practicing this profession for the span of 22 years, more or less.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask what gave you that rise in interest to get into physiotherapy in the first place?
So I'm born in a medical family. My father is no more in the physical body, but he's been like a general practitioner in Thane for more than 45 years. He practiced. So I've always watched him treat patients and heal patients actually. And he had a very busy practice. Like he would go to his clinic at 8 or 9 a.m. in the morning, come home by 2:33, just grab lunch, take a short nap, again go back by 6, and then come back by 11:30, 12. And and sometimes there would be house calls even after that, or some emergency visits. So I didn't get enough of his time as a kid growing up, though I would still be up. In my growing years, we had a relative in our place who had my actually very close relative, and he was posted actually for an amputation. And fortunately, because my father had connects at Bombay Hospital, he took them to a surgeon and they could save the limb and not go in for an amputation. And after that, there would be a lady who would come home and she would make some exercises, do with him, and this uncle would stay with us. He almost stayed with us for a good 1.5 2 months. And as a child, I was curious, like what she's doing. She would make him do some movements and exercises. And I had seen my uncle who came on a wheelchair, and after a couple of months, he went up walking. So I found that really intriguing, and that stayed like a memory in my head. That, and I must be around maybe 12 or 13-year-old at that time. So definitely was inclined to do something in the medical field. And then as I went to my 12th grade and then got my marks and everything, I think it was pretty clear that I wanted to do something which added meaning to somebody's life. I'm not saying that as a medical practitioner I would do that, but I just found that helping someone getting back to movement was adding so much value to their life, and I found it interesting. So that's how I got into physiotherapy.
Is that why your initial years were more focused on neuro rehab or trauma rehab?
Yeah. So as I was studying physiotherapy, I was mesmerized with the neurophysiology, chapter in Guyton, and I would keep reading that chapter over and over again about the brain, about the spinal cord, and I just felt that every time I was reading that chapter, I would learn something new.
Yes.
And that's when I decided that I want to do my master's in neuro, because it just it was just so challenging. It was so interesting about the brain and everything. So that's why I did by choice, I took my master's in neuro, and I really enjoyed doing that. And after that, I did practice as a neurophysiotherapist for a good maybe 3 to 4 years, treating stroke patients and Parkinson's and spinal cord injury patients, and it was very fulfilling also. So loved it, and I still feel that having that knowledge and delving deep into the brain and the neurobiology now helps me as a sports physio.
Definitely. That brings me to the next question: is how did you move from being a neurophysiotherapist
Right.
and transition from there to founding Physiokinesis in 2016
Right.
and starting a sports physiotherapy clinic?
Right.
That's a radical change
Change.
in
Yeah.
career.
So, actually, when I was practicing neuro and I was very happy with what I was doing, and then in 2007, Jupiter Hospital came up in Thane, and fortunately through the interviews and meeting the founders, they offered me a position over there, and I was like the founding physio over there. Now I had to set up the department over there, and set up, and they started off with the cardiac wing before and the ICUs, etc. So I didn't have the choice to say ki sorry, I am a neurophysio. So I had to go back and do all that, and then obviously set up a team. So then we had OPD, IPD, and varied patients, right? So then I started seeing all kinds of patients, and obviously when there would be a neuro case where they specially wanted my interest, they would say ki Shweta ma'am, you see this patient, or I would guide my other physios who were there in the team to take care of the patients. So that's when my practice from core neuro became a little wide in terms of seeing different specialities as well. And then being in the OPD, you have to see patients, everything you have to see. And then I decided, okay, fine, then let me do some more courses. So I did taping, tried to do all the courses that are required for MSK physio kind of a thing, because for almost 3-4 years, I was purely seeing neuro patients. So I wanted to touch base with that. So did all the courses required, in terms of TheraBand, workshops, Swiss ball workshops, everything that is required for shoulder rehab, knee rehab, etc. And then was seeing patients. Patients were definitely getting better, and that was the journey in Jupiter Hospital. Then I took a break from Jupiter because I was expecting my second baby. And after that, I just took a break because I thought I have 2 kids, so I need to just be at home and spend some time with them. And but in that 2 years also, I was people would contact, they would say, "Are you free? Are you available?" There were some friends and family who would ask, "Are you there at home?" So I would start seeing patients at home as well. Some athletes had come at that time. There was a swimmer whom I was taking care of. So she got better. And then to basically get over my postpartum weight gain, I joined marathon running.
Oh, okay.
So 2011, my daughter was born, and 2013 or by the end of 2012, I thought, ki, chalo, let's start,
Let's
of a
start.
thing. My husband already was in a group. We were in a group called as Striders. They're still there. They're a running group. So I joined them, ki, chalo, let's start running. And somehow I just picked on. And then when you're in a group, as a physio and as a runner, acha, he's a physio, she's a physio. So then, people start contacting you. I said, I have an IT band pain, I have a shin pain. And then I was operating from home. And then obviously when people start getting better, it's like word of mouth. And then there was a point when I told my husband that I don't think I can manage this at home anymore. And
I have to branch out.
I need a space.
Yeah.
And that's when we started looking out for a space. Okay, let's see, and actually that time also a lot of runners all the way from Thane would go to a sports rehab center based out of South Mumbai in Parel. And
Niranjan Pandit?
No, it was Shamal Vallabhji's Heal Institute.
Oh, yeah.
So everyone would go there. So then it also happened at that time that I told one of my friends, ki, why don't you take me and to meet Shamal, because he knew him well. And then after meeting him, it was like, okay, we have the same thought process and everything. And I just said, ki, would you be interested to open up a branch in Thane? So he was like, yeah, more than happy. We have a lot of runners. So I actually started Physiokinesis, like it was Heal with Physiokinesis way back in 2016. It was like a
I didn't know that.
franchisee with
Yeah.
the Heal Institute. Yeah.
And then from that,
And from then, obviously, since Heal was a purely sports rehab place, then obviously there were a lot of physios, patients for sports rehab coming. I was a lot into my running, so patients would come, and then that's how we developed that practice. And Heal Institute had this physio plus strength and conditioning and sports massage kind of a ecosystem in the clinic. And somehow I was also practicing the same way. Like I would practice physio as well as strength and conditioning. The massage aspect, obviously, I didn't have any access to. But after being at Heal and seeing that, how people were getting recovery with the sports or a deep tissue massage, so that same we kind of replicated that entire practice.
wow,
In so that's how we started in
it sounds like it's quite organic for you.
Yes,
Like it
yeah.
just flowed
It just
in.
flowed in. Yeah. Just you sometimes you just happen to meet the right people at the right time, and if your thought and your
Capitalize on
visions
that. Yeah.
connect, then you can always build upon your dreams.
Definitely. That's a nice way of getting into sports from neuro.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah,
yes.
definitely. As an inspiration for young physios, because I know that there's a lot of physios that look up to you, that look up to physiokinesis. And I also know there's a lot of young physios that have completed their master's course in US, in UK, in Canada, and have now come back to spend some time with their family and to settle down here. And they want to start their own clinics, they want to have their own practice set up. But in this ever changing market, it becomes quite difficult to actually find a mentor who would be that open and advise you with good intentions in their heart. So, as a mentor for young physios, what advice would you give to people who are just starting up or setting up a new practice and they want to scale it up and make it into a stable career option in the future and not die down?
I think one major thing that today's physios need to learn is patience. I think they want things too fast and are not willing to give that time to learn and to go through. What I feel is that if you're someone who's just fresh out of college, even out of bachelor's or master's, I still feel that you're seeing patients, though you have the confidence, you have the knowledge, you're still seeing clients or patients in a protective environment. Like you always have your seniors, your professors, or somebody to watch over you. But when you are out in the market, it's completely different. It's the clients, how you handle them. Like just today, we had a client who had come to the clinic who actually yelled at one of my physio and said that डॉक्टर ने जो लिखा है उतना करो, आप ज़्यादा क्वेश्चन मत पूछो. Like even today we are getting such questions from educated clientele,
People,
right? Yeah. So it is we are getting that kind of questions as well. But we need to still in 2025 still need to educate people that we are clinicians as well. It's not, we are not some kind of a assistant or something who just does what has been told kind of a thing, and we have an assistance assessment system. So I feel that taking and staying with an organization to learn that it's not just about seeing patients. See, when you have to build a clinic, there are also leadership skills that you need to know. There are organization skills. There are so many small things
Behind
that
the
happen
scenes, yeah.
behind the scenes. It's not that, you just open up a clinic and you can just start. Unfortunately, in none of our courses, we are taught about management or business, how to get the monies right, like in terms of how much you're investing in the place, what equipments, what are you going to charge. At the end of the day, everyone wants to make money, but are we
Doing it the
right way, or are we equipped with that knowledge? So I feel that you should spend some time, at least the new physio should spend some time getting that knowledge, maybe watching or being in spaces where such kind of a practice is done. Keep an open mind, keep learning, and then maybe try to venture out. And having knowledge in finances and management, having some more leadership skills, working as a team. See, at the end of the day, if you want to start a clinic, how many patients can you see in a day?
12 13
Max. Okay,
Yeah.
so and on an average, if we say in Thane, if we say somebody will pay 1,000 rupees, 1,200 rupees per session. No,
Yeah.
it doesn't make sense for us, right?
Yeah.
Investing rent in a good place would be somewhere between 70,000 to a lakh if you want a good space.
Mm.
Doesn't the maths doesn't fit there, right? So you need to work as a team.
Mm.
You can't just do it by yourself.
True. True.
And when you work as that, you also need to learn to let go of certain things. So, and this all comes with maturity, with
Yeah.
learning.
Mm.
Doesn't come with one first or second year of practice. It comes when when you have teams coming, teams leaving you, patients going away. You learn all these things and everything, but you know that you're still surviving. Patients are still coming.
Yeah.
So it means that you are doing something right.
True.
So I just feel that a lot of learning, patience, and try to learn something more than your own subject. It's not just you've learned physiotherapy, you've invested 8 years of graduation and masters, internship pakad ke, you've invested that much time in learning the subject. But all these soft skills of management, leadership is very, very important.
I remember this one line which a famous surgeon from Pune used to say, Dr. Chetan Pradhan. He used to say that if you are able to have good results with 75% of your client list,
Yeah,
you're doing something right.
right. Yeah.
There is no clinic on earth which will be able to give you 100% results.
True.
So you need to be acceptable of those 25% of those a few cases
Yes.
which probably they don't agree with your viewpoint or they are
Yeah.
not in the proper mindset at that time to be helped.
Right.
And you need to just accept it and be proud of the 75% which you have done good,
Yeah.
and then keep pushing on. That should be your motivation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think at the end of the day, you have to ask, like, did you give the right advice to your patient?
Mm.
And were you able to get that partnership with that patient? And if that partnership didn't go well, it's not just about you, it's also about that client as well. So you don't
Definitely.
have to criticize, because whatever you're doing is you're doing with good intention. Like, I've had physios or people from my team who are very fresh, like, ma'am, what if I'm doing something wrong? I said, there's nothing wrong.
Hmm.
What is wrong? You're doing it in the right intention for the patient, right? So the intent matters.
Hmm.
Now, if that turns out to be wrong, if the patient's pain increases, you know how to take care of it, right? So it happens, and it's not a magic, right? We are not God. We cannot say abracadabra and your pain is
Yeah.
gone.
True.
Some exercises are going to pay your patient pain, but educating and telling your patient
Hmm.
that this exercise may increase your pain as well. We are giving it to decrease your pain, but it may increase your pain. So at least the patient is aware that, okay, my doctor had told me or my physio had told me.
Yeah.
So then you know that you're doing the right thing.
I think as a general rule of thumb, what I tell my patients is, progress or healing is not linear.
Exactly.
It's always an up and down
Yeah,
process.
yeah.
You will have some days which are good.
Yeah.
You will have some days which are bad.
True.
Most of the injuries that you want to rehabilitate, they come in with an increase in pain.
Yeah.
But you need to be aware of it. On a scale of 0 to 10, if the pain is in the limit of 3 or 5 on 10,
Yeah.
you're doing something right.
Right.
It's okay.
Right.
And if you have got that pain or that swelling with these exercises,
Right.
and it doesn't go down in the next 24 hours and it
Right.
stays on more than the 24-hour period, you probably have done a bit too much.
Yes.
So
Yes.
that is a there's no personalized exercise to everybody.
No,
you just
right.
have to
Yeah.
play the odds and
Yes.
find what works
Yeah.
best for you. Any
True.
kind of rehab, any kind of exercise,
True. Very true.
which
Agree
is what
with you.
I
Yeah,
tell my
yeah.
patients as well.
Exactly. That's what we also try to tell our patients. But yes. Yeah.
You did mention a bit about how some patients come in with a preconceived notion that
Yeah.
they have to do these 4-5 exercises because it has been prescribed by an orthopedic surgeon or
Right.
it has been prescribed by a trauma surgeon.
Right.
And they because those doctors have been at a level of prestige for a number of years,
True.
they tend to respect those doctors quite a lot.
True.
But in reality, what I would say is the surgeons have a much rather comprehensive knowledge about surgery
Yeah.
and about surgical practices and different modes of surgeries
True.
and all the implementations that they do. But when it comes to physiotherapy, they do not have a lot of clarity on it, and they tend to probably push. I mean, I know where they come from, what mindset they come from, and it's completely agreeable. But they tend to slightly, somewhat be a bit more aggressive towards the surgical approach
True.
rather than the conservative approach, and there can be many reasons for it.
Yeah.
But I think that it's very important for patients to understand that the level of expertise and the knowledge of expertise is quite different for a physio and
Yes.
for a surgeon,
Yes.
and we should be able to respect each and everybody's opinion. Like, tomorrow morning I wouldn't go and tell a surgeon that you should not do an ACL
Exactly. Like
using
we
a
do
hamstring
not,
graft.
we don't send, we send, like whenever I send a note to a doctor, like, hello, Dr. XYZ, I am sending patient XYZ for your opinion. He's complaining of knee pain. Please opine.
Yeah.
I do not tell him no that this patient has a lax ACL. This test is positive that way. Please do a hamstring level graft.
Yeah,
No,
yeah,
I
yeah.
don't have that audacity,
No,
and I will
no.
never do this.
Yeah, that's
so
so
I
true.
expect that from. I hope maybe I'll get some grief on this from the medical crowd, but you can just say physiotherapy treatment, whatever, but when you put 10 sessions of IFT, 10 sessions of 10s, and then core exercises and do these exercises,
Mhm.
then the patient probably will come with that. See, even you and me, if we go to a doctor and the doctor tells us a certain prescription for us to cure, we will follow it to the T, right?
That's
So-
our Bible.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
the same thing. So I will not blame the patient also, because if the doctor has written this, that means he or she feels that okay, this is a prescription. Like if you are diabetic, these are the medicines. If you are hypertensive, these are the medicines. Okay, physiotherapy, this modality.
True.
So the patient also cannot be blamed. But saying that, still after all these years, from being an allied professional to be called, it has taken so many years for us to be called like we are also medical health professionals now. I think the mandate was
think-
just passed last month that we are now mainstream health professionals and not allied health professionals. So it's taken that long, and some more long for people, general Aam Janta, to know that we are also clinicians and we have a system of assessment. Like this patient was not allowing my team member to take the history as well. He's like, "Aap kyun sawal pooch rahe ho? Why are you asking these questions? You just do what's supposed to be done." So she's like, "I need to know. I need to examine her in my own way."
Of course.
And it was just so it's a
patient
long
was-
way. We
yeah.
need to keep educating one patient at a time, is what I say. So most of the times in our first consultation, which goes for an hour, around 40 minutes just goes in 45
taking.
minutes in history taking and in educating and in telling them about how their journey is going to be.
True. If a patient likes the physio that
Yeah.
is treating them,
Yeah.
their chances of recovery are drastically improved. There's a study which says that the patient therapist compliance
Compliance
plays
is
a huge role
Yeah,
in your rehabilitation
Definitely.
outcomes.
Definitely.
So I think just being able to have that connection with the patient and
True.
for the patient to trust us would also play a huge part. So
Yeah.
even my initial consultation lasts for 45 minutes to an hour, and
Yeah.
most of that time just goes on in history taking and building a relationship
Yeah.
with the client
Right.
and their entire holistic approach towards rehabilitation or injury.
Yeah.
It takes into account their stresses,
Yeah.
mental stress, financial stress,
Yeah, their hobbies, what they like to do in life, where do they work, what kind of
Exactly.
environment they are in, especially when their pains are triggered, where they are they home, are they at work? So many questions. It's
And
it's
what-
that trust that you develop in that
True.
1 hour.
So, your clinic is known for its holistic approach. So, when we see a lot of other clinics as compared to your clinic, it has a lot of multidisciplinary team approach.
Yeah.
So you have got physiotherapists, you have got massage therapists, you have got strength and conditioning coaches,
Yeah.
you have got sports scientists that focus a lot on that strength and conditioning aspect,
Yes.
and you also have got referrals with other surgeons that you send out to.
Yeah.
So more than just a physiotherapy clinic, it's a one-stop shop
Yes.
for all your needs. You're also be able to provide nutritional aspect to
Yes. Yes.
the clients.
Yeah.
What gave rise to that kind of a thought process rather than just having a traditional physiotherapy approach?
So this also one aspect of it is that when I was practicing in the OPD at Jupiter Hospital, I would realize is that patients who are coming with maybe shoulder impingement or knee ligament issues or something like that. I'm taking care of their pain, definitely. Like, I would do the rehab and everything. And but I was also realizing that I'm not doing a complete job, because the patient will either come back to me after a couple of months or go to somewhere else saying that, I went there, but things, didn't work, kind of a
Yeah.
thing. And you get to know from here and there, if the physio is somebody whom they would call and they would ask. And then I realized that somewhere that, that there is a missing piece to the puzzle, that I'm not doing a complete job. So somewhere I realized that, okay, strength and conditioning is something that I need to include. And that's when I was seeing the athletes and when I was running myself, I was doing some strengthening exercises to support my running. And that's how I also started doing strengthening for whoever I was seeing. My son at that time was just learning to learn tennis. So then, since I was just sitting there watching him, I had approached the coach that, let me take some strength and conditioning exercises for the whoever is playing with you, just for that at least it will support their game. And then that's how I started realizing that, okay, this is basically kind of one missing puzzle is there. The second puzzle was about recovery. Is like, with I feel massage is a great way for recovery and very important. And that's how I realized that, okay, having recovery, having strength and conditioning, and injury management, these three pillars are definitely something that we need to have. And after that, it was every time one of the values at Physiokinesis that we follow is customer centric. So we always listen to our customers. So whenever we've had a tie up with a nutritionist, it's because if they trust me with physiotherapy and SNC and massage, they would want somebody whom I trust for nutrition. So, okay, fine. One person is asking, okay, now 5 people are asking. Let's onboard
There's
a
a demand for
nutritionist. There's a
nutrition.
demand.
Yeah.
Okay. One athlete is asking for a sports psychologist. Okay, now 4-5 are asking. Okay, sports psychologist. So then we realize we need to find people who work the same way, have the same values as us, and then kind of onboard them. So it has always been customer driven. Or whatever extra services that we've had is always, whenever we've added any kind of tech also to our the testing for the performance, it's always because patients have asked us why, what, how do you know that my strength has improved? Now, how do you know my running gait has improved? Okay, I can explain biomechanics to you, but I don't think you'll understand.
Yeah.
But when I show him a video with angles, okay, fine, okay, this is how I
Can you
understand.
briefly tell me what all equipments do we have at Physiokinesis?
At Physiokinesis, in terms of tech, we have a handheld dynamometer. We have running gait analysis. We have the walled force sticks. We have the ROX HAMS Pro, which is like a agility thing, very similar to Blaze Pod. So it's like you have those 7 or 8 pods, and then they keep changing colors and helps for agility. And we have a Hyperlab, which works like a timing gate and agility as well. So right now, this is the tech that we have.
And we have Shockwave.
Yeah, we have shockwave
Yeah.
in terms of therapy, and
Yeah.
we also have ultrasound and IFT,
And IFT.
which we sparingly use, but sometimes we use it, especially with senior patients, or sometimes if we want them to comply with the exercises for a few sessions, maybe 1 or 2 sessions, we give them that therapy.
Yeah.
So that's why we have some, we do use dry needling, we use taping. At the end of the day, when you do clinical practice, it's all depending upon who's in front of you and how you basically get them to be your partner in their recovery, and whatever it takes. Then if it is cupping, if it is needling, if it is IFT, or if it is plain manual therapy and exercises, there are some patients who are okay, fine, exercises it is, kind of a thing. But whatever works to get that partnership going in their recovery journey
Agreed.
is we use it. It's not that I'm not that there are some physios or somebody who will do like 50 needles or 25 needles. No, it's just whatever is needed for that session and that day we do it. But yeah, our main goal is to basically get them to love movement, whatever works for them, whether it's walking, whether it is gymming, whether it's playing a sport. Some kind of movement has to be there in everybody's life right now.
Definitely.
It's a must.
Yeah, we have become a society of sitting down and just typing
Doom scrolling.
stuff. Doom scrolling society. I think movement is the medicine
Yeah.
which we need
Yes.
rather than pharmaceuticals or anything else on a
Yeah.
larger scale.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
You touched down on a few topics about tech which is available, and your entire journey for physiokinesis has been going on since the last 9 years now.
Yeah.
And the recent development in physiokinesis is that you have opened up a new branch in Charai.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Oh, Charai's clinic is my dad's clinic. My dad practiced there for about 45 years, and he gave the place to me. So continuing the legacy there. So it's a mini physiokinesis over there. No performance services, but basic physiotherapy in terms of rehab, getting phase 1 rehab in terms of whatever we can do. So can work as a satellite clinic to at least, because Thane has grown like
That's grown
crazy.
exponentially.
Like
Yeah.
I've born and brought up here, so for me, there was nothing beyond Singhania school as a child.
Yeah.
Coming to Tikku Jinewadi was a picnic. Now I live in near Tikku Jinewadi.
Yes,
So
yes,
it's like
100%.
so though we have a lot of doctors who are in central Thane, and they do refer us to Godbandar with the Thane traffic for patients
There's not a
to
lot
come.
of
It's too much. So at
compliance.
least then we have a clinic over there. So it's just very new now.
I think even in my own practice, that is one principle which I follow, which is I think you should always be able to test
Yeah.
and not guess.
Yeah.
And the only way that you can test is by having an objective assessment.
True.
So it can be using all those things which you spoke about, for example, force decks
Yeah.
or walled force plates,
Yeah.
wherein you get everything individualized. Or it can also be very crude as to, for a runner, how many single leg calf raises can you
Yes.
do?
Yeah.
If you are able to do 30, 35 and above, you
Yes.
probably fall in the injury
Risk,
prevention.
yeah.
You're low risk for
Low risk,
injury.
yeah.
But anything more than that, less than that, you would probably have
Right.
to strengthen it a bit more.
True, true.
So that's a principle which I definitely follow, and
Yeah.
which our clinic also follows in London, which is
Right.
recovery.
Right.
So that's something which we are very, very particular about.
Right.
What's one misconception about physiotherapy that you would like to debunk via this podcast?
That physiotherapy is expensive. I mean, if you want to get a surgery done, you're going to spend in lakhs. So physiotherapy is in thousands. So it's not so expensive.
It's definitely ensuring that you are putting the value back into your own
Yeah,
health.
I mean, I just feel that every patient should think of it as an investment that they are doing. They are learning a lot of things in the process. It's not just about managing their body. It's about understanding how to move, understanding. There's so much of knowledge sharing that happens that they get to learn about their own bodies. Sometimes they end up doing things that they even didn't know that they could do. So I just feel that that there is a lot of value that is added. 45 minutes, 1 hour, which doctor gives you?
True.
Tell
True.
me, which doctor, which medical field doctor, gives you that kind of a time?
Nobody.
Nobody.
Except probably for a psychologist. There's no other doctor that provides
But
that.
psychologist again, therapist,
Yeah,
right?
it's therapy.
It's a therapy.
Yeah.
Like a psychiatrist, no, right?
Mhm.
Like he would just talk to you and probably prescribe a few meds to
And
you,
then done.
right? And
Yeah.
the counseling is usually taken by his or her, therapist. Very few doctors would spend time that 1 hour. So 1 hour, that value for time
Hmm.
is what I feel that everyone should value. That it's time over whatever we are charging you. We are giving you that 1 hour of time. So whenever clients say that, oh, your charges are too much, it's because we are giving you that 1 hour.
True.
It's
We're
not
giving you that
a
45
10 minutes or 15 minutes of just one-sided conversation.
Yeah.
Here we are doing that, and you are healing at every step.
True. I think physiokinesis as a lab or physiokinesis as a clinic focuses a lot on athletes and injury prevention in sports as their primary target.
Yeah, around 60% of our clientele would be somebody who's in an active population, may not be purely professional athletes. There are also a lot of marathon runners, amateur athletes, leisure athletes
Weekend
who also come,
warriors, we
weekend
call it.
warriors
Yeah.
also who come. And then the rest 40% would be regular back pains, knee pains, geriatric cases, and
Okay.
everything.
So it is not only a clinic which is meant for athletes, it is a
No.
clinic which is open for all.
Yeah,
And-
anyone who wants to move scientifically or get better scientifically, it's a place for that.
You're
Whoever,
more than welcome to
more
come
than
in
welcome. So
and-
we also do geriatric wellness programs. We have senior citizens who are coming, people who have who were active, had an incident, maybe like an angioplasty and everything, but it's been years, but still aspire to get back to some form of fitness. A lot of clients are actually from our own pool. For example, if there is someone who's come to us with a back pain and but also has to get fit eventually once the back pain is gone, if I send that person to any gym for that matter, I'm not sure how the personal trainer has that knowledge or that acumen to take that patient who's reasonably, this person is also maybe deadlifting some, or doing RDLs or doing some hip thrusts with us and then discharged, but whether that person will be careful. So that's when the lab also helps, because we have a safe environment for them to transition. So we teach them form, technique, everything. We take them under our wing. So even if after a couple of months they want to go and do gymming on their own, they know, they can tell the personal trainer, okay, I know, kind of a thing.
Yeah, I've got the knowledge to support myself.
Yes, yeah.
And I won't be harming my body.
Yes, exactly.
in
So
the
we equip them with that knowledge. So that is how we try to work. Yeah.
That brings me to the next one. If you have a novice walk-in, somebody who has not run before, somebody who has not been active at all, and he probably wants to chase an event. He wants to chase a half marathon, a full marathon. I won't talk about ultras because these are too heavy. But if he wants to chase an event, how would you as a lab, with all the technology that you have, be able to support him? So we'll be more specific so people can pick it up. Let's pick running, and let's pick 10 kilometer as the race.
Right.
If who have never run before, I walk into the clinic and I've got a 10 kilometer run in the next 4 months. What would be the strategy, the planning, the assessment that your team would ensure that I don't have any more injuries, or I'm able to sail as smoothly as possible? Because I think injury prevention is a wrong word. You
Yeah.
cannot ever prevent injury.
The word is risk mitigation.
Risk mitigation is the
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that is what we can't say injury can be prevented, it is going to happen.
True.
I mean,
True.
injury is, you may be the best runner, you must be following everything to the T, but injury can hit you from anywhere. Yeah,
True.
and sometimes it may not be your fault, it can be an accident as well. So I just feel that educating clients and embracing pain and injury as a part of your system of your body, telling you some information that this part needs some care or this part needs to be looked at, is something that we also do. Now when it comes to somebody who wants to start running, at the performance lab, no client can enter without doing a fitness test. So it all starts with the fitness test, and it is specific to the sport. Now when it comes to running, since we know that, let's take, since 10K is it's a long distance running, so we will take it as it's a single leg sport. So we will do a lot of, we usually do first a physio assessment. We'll just clear for basic tightnesses, basic strength, etc., for the stabilizers, for the glute meets, for the VMO, whether all that is fine, kind of a thing, whether the person has the basic strength for all these things. Once we have cleared it, then we would give it to the sports science team. And for a runner, usually we do ankle mobility, we do hip mobility tests, where we do some objective tests for that as well. Then we have a lower body endurance test, where we would do a squat test, as well as we would do a single leg bridge test and a single leg calf raises. So, and then we have the data for day one for that person. For we also do an upper body strength push-ups in a minute, how much they can do, and then we do a 8-stage plank test. So basically, what stage they are able to do it, and once we have this, we also would do like a step test to just see whether their heart rate, how is their recovery in terms of that. Once we have that data, we have day one ka data, and basis on that, we try to create a plan for them in terms of strength and conditioning. Now, if their strength is very poor, we will probably put them on a walk mode, then go on a walk jog mode, and slowly start increasing the distance over a period of time, and parallelly start the strength training also for it. So that's how we would go around building that distance and time, and focusing basically on distance initially, slowly, and then obviously parallelly, if and if this way they do it, then doing a 10K in 6 months is easy. But
easy.
most of the times they do not do it. They want to rush into it.
Yeah.
And that's where the MTSS and the shin splints and all started coming, because it is too much too soon for them.
True.
So that's how it usually goes. But
Where would you place running assessment? Because you do have the facility
Yeah.
of high-tech cameras, and you've got a treadmill, and then
Right.
it records your entire running assessment kit.
Right, yeah.
Where would you place running assessment?
So I wouldn't do that for a beginner's runner, because again, that's too much information bombarding to them, and they would not know exactly, where I'm going wrong, what I'm doing wrong, when I have not even started doing something. So I would let them go in terms of obviously educate them about what's the right running form, the landing styles, how they should brace their core, how their arm swing should be, and obviously give them the cues to monitor themselves. We usually use the running gait analysis when someone is getting repeated injuries, most of the time same injury coming back again and again. So that is one of the red flags that we see. And when we see form and technique, we maybe this person may be reasonably strong, so we don't see any strength issues in this person, but the injury is still coming back. So, there are runners who come and say that every time in the 15th kilometer or 16th kilometer my pain comes, and and then my pace goes down, and I targeted a sub 2 but it didn't happen, kind of a thing. So these are sometimes where we start thinking that okay, there may be a form and technique going wrong when fatigue is setting in. So maybe that's where things are going wrong.
That's when you start
That's
getting
when we
in.
start getting. So majorly it is then. There are some people who would want to know that I want to know if I'm running right, I'm targeting, especially if I'm graduating from a distance, like from a 10K, I'm getting into a 21K, I'm doing it reasonably well. From 21 going to a 42. So that's when we also suggest doing a running analysis so that we can see if they, because correcting form and technique is a very long way, and usually clients are not agreeing to that.
Yeah.
There is a lot of also, I may think that I am a 4 foot or a mid-foot striker, but when the running analysis shows a heel strike, people are like, no, I don't do that.
Yeah.
Kind of a thing. So sometimes it's a shocker for them.
Denial.
They are in denial that नहीं ये तो मैं नहीं करता, ये शायद because I'm running on the treadmill it must be happening. So we can take this same system, we can take it on the road as well. So we have done it for a couple of runners where we can take it on the road running and do the same analysis, and we can tell them that no, you are heel striking kind
That's
of a thing.
interesting.
And if the though I don't feel that you need to change the form if there is no injury, but yeah, if there is an injury which is coming back again and again, then maybe thinking about change of form and technique is needed.
This question is aimed at the general population. Most of the people right now, they tend to have an office-based job, a desk-based job, and then they land up with lower back problems, neck problems, and hand problems, mainly TFCC and
Yeah.
carpal tunnel and other things like
Yeah.
that. What would be your general advice to the population who is in a desk-based job as to how to manage the risk of injuries?
Again, we keep harping this line, movement is medicine, and our human body is designed to move. It doesn't like to be boxed up in one place.
True.
Even right now, we've been sitting for quite some time, but we are still, changing our position. Sometimes we change the position of our legs, or, we try to adjust our spine. These are signs that our body is giving. But once you are on a project, especially for IT professionals who are supposed to be watching the screen for a long time, they just ignore these signs and symptoms. But I feel that right now you're like in a, like, way years back there were no reminders from your watch to stand, or there are so many ways that you can add movement to your life. You have adjustable desks, you can just shift from a sitting desk to a standing desk, you can work standing for some time, you can go back to sitting. So I feel that education, that keep changing your position of working for at least every 1 hour 2 hours, just work differently. If you're taking calls, you can always walk and talk and take the calls if you don't have to be sitting in one position. But I feel that right now, if you have it, I don't think it's also very expensive to get all these adjustment made to your desks if you want to really optimize your work situation. But I also feel that adding movement breaks in your whatever schedule it allows, like when you're taking a tea break or you're taking a lunch break, just going up and down staircases, taking a walk, going and meeting your colleagues, just add these movement breaks. Snack breaks is what I call movement snack breaks. Instead of having just snack breaks, just take movement snack breaks in between. And whatever exercise, at least try to include 3 to 4 days of week where you do at least 20 to 30 minutes of some form of activity that you enjoy, is something that is much needed, is what I feel, because that's how you are going to, because if this is an environment that you are going to work, that you have to work 8 hours in this environment, optimize it to your body, right? You have to work towards it. You are optimizing somebody's life by creating a software program. Why don't you optimize your own life by adding some movement to it? So it's just about a little bit of thoughtfulness. And right now, so many reminders are there. You can put reminders, Siri, Alexa, everything is there.
Yeah.
So
Make sure that the wearable
use
tech
them.
works for you.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
just use them for your benefit. So
Definitely.
yeah.
I think even research shows that the most prevalent pain amongst the general diaspora is lower back
Lower
pain.
back pain. Yeah.
And there has been a lot of research coming out from Australia before this, which said that McKenzie works, or all those exercise techniques work. But
Yeah.
recently in the past 5 years or so,
Hmm.
all the research about lower back pain has just been about movement.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is no certain specific set of exercise that works
Right.
for you or that
Right.
works for back pain.
Yeah.
Whatever you can incorporate in your daily lifestyle and make sure that you're able to stick to it, any kind of movement. So
True.
if you're an ex-rugby player
Yeah.
and you have had lower back pain for years and now you can't play rugby,
Right.
just step into the rugby field when everybody else is playing and just move around.
Right.
Or if you are a footballer, just step into the football pitch, just walk around, just make sure that you have got movement which
Yeah.
is specific to you
True.
and which you are able to incorporate. I think that's what lower back research also says.
Yeah, I mean, it's at the end of the day, it all boils down to how well you have done your rehab, and again, to what level. So, what happens usually is that why does it come back again? Is that people stop at pain free, and then they start getting back to life. Now, life would be probably going and playing pickleball with your friends, or playing cricket, or playing whatever, or going for a run, or something like that. But did you train your body to that level? No, you just did rehab, basic rehab. And still we have patients who are like, I do those 10 exercises that my physio had taught me when I got back pain the first time. I still do it regularly, but why did I get this back pain
You
now?
need to progressively
Exactly,
load
that
it up.
progress, that
Yeah.
threshold, that is not basically. You try to attempt more in life once you're pain free, but did you do that kind of work? No. So obviously the pain is going to come because you're challenging your body to a different threshold altogether. So I feel that education is very, very important, that they need to do this rehab or need to strengthen to that level, is what is there. And as I said, the way the lifestyle is right now, like, even for that matter, like, even our moms or our grandmoms, they are also now still stuck with their phone, right? They also have, where they would go down and go to a neighbor's house and speak to a friend or meet a neighbor. Now everything is done through WhatsApp.
True.
And there is
True.
video call. So
True.
everyone was glued to their phone. So but taking that effort to get up and move is, even for groceries, like in COVID, everything was coming home. Now COVID is gone, but still everything is coming
Yeah.
home.
You have Blinkit, you have everything.
Blinkit, we have Swiggy, we
Yeah.
have Zepto, we have
Yeah.
everything that is teaching us that, okay, you don't need to move.
Yeah, making your
And
life
now we have to, and as physios, we are telling everybody move.
True.
So it's like
it's counterproductive
it's
to what they
counterproductive.
want in life.
yeah, the way the world is progressing,
Yeah.
I don't have to move anything. I don't even have to say. I just say, Alexa, order this from Zepto. It is just done.
True,
It
true.
is. It's
Definitely. So for the next part of the podcast, free topics, which are considered slightly controversial. So I just wanted to know your opinions on it. The first one, running is bad for your knees.
wrong. It's false.
And why would you say that?
Nothing has happened to my knees yet. So, so it's again a misconception. But saying that, there are a little bit of caveats of doing something the right way. There is a method to the madness that you're getting into. So I just feel that if you want to run longer, you want to increase your running longevity, it's not going to damage your knees. In fact, I think there are researches which shows that there is good healthy cartilage building up if you are into any kind of physical activity, and even running for that matter. So I do not stop people from running.
I think one reason why that was very prevalent is because there was a research done which showed that running causes you to have early changes in osteoarthritis. But my critical analysis for that research paper would be, it was done on professional runners.
Right.
It was
So the volumes are different,
exactly,
right?
yeah. It was done on a small cohort of professional runners where their weekly mileage was around 150 to 200 kilometers.
Right.
And anything beyond before that, like if you're in your amateur zone,
Yeah.
it's the best for you.
Right.
It will not cause you osteoarthritis.
See,
It will
most of the
yeah.
marathon runners who are running, whatever. These are all amateur runners, right?
True.
That competitive level, there is a shelf life to it. They compete for those years and then they are gone, right?
Yeah.
So that's how they usually plan. An athlete who is competing has a cycle. They will plan which races, how much to be done. Their training is planned accordingly, and that is their lifestyle. For us, we are running a business, we are taking care of family, and we are running.
True.
So I feel that movement actually helps us in terms of thing. But yeah, as I said, there is a method to the madness. So once it all starts when you start becoming competitive about your own performance, and at that point of time, if you start believing that if I keep running, I'm going to get better at running and not consider recovery and strength and conditioning, then obviously you're going to damage these.
Like the greatest of all time, Kipchoge.
Yeah.
He has set the record for the fastest marathon in
Yeah.
under 2 hours.
Yeah.
When he ran the London Marathon this year,
Mm.
he came in second,
Hmm.
I think, and he said that there's no reason for me to be running for first.
Yeah.
I'm just running to inspire the next generation of community or the next generation of
True.
runners
Yeah.
to ensure that they get the same inspiration and they get to crack those things. I'm just running for inspiration.
Right.
So what you said about like professional athletes having a cycle and dipping out of the sport after a certain point
Right.
definitely makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's 40 age.
Yeah.
He's 40 years right now.
Yeah.
So it's the right time for him to just
Yeah. Slow down.
slow down and then
mentor
focus
people.
on
Build
other
the
things as well.
champions of coming the next decade.
True.
Yeah.
So next question, ACL rehab, which is one of the most common injuries in sport, happens due to a lot of reasons. ACL rehab, conservative management or surgical approach? Because there's a lot of talk about the cross bracing protocol
Yeah.
and going for a conservative management and letting the ACL heal on its own
Right.
and then working around it
Mhm.
rather than immediately jumping into a surgery and then shaving 9 months off of a year just for rehab and things.
Right.
What's your take on it?
So, I have been asked this question before at a conference as well, but I feel it's every case is individualistic. It all depends on that person. I know someone who had a ACL tear maybe in his early 40s, and he chose not to go in for surgery. But he is now an Ironman. He's trained himself to be an Ironman and he mentors other people.
And he's got no ACL.
He has no ACL. He's an ACL deficient knee.
Yeah.
But he did invest a lot of time in strength and conditioning. He strengthened his, hamstrings, his calf, his properly, scientifically he approached it. And he's living, he's diving, he's doing everything, Then there are people who have ACLs just happen, like degenerative ACL at a very early age without any kind of background in fitness. So it's for them sometimes surgery may be needed because if they are just in their 40s, they still have at least half of their life to go ahead, and then asking for early arthritic changes. So then you might consider doing surgery for them. Sports people, definitely, like if you are wanting to get back and you have a partial to full thickness tear, I would obviously ask you to do, get a surgery done. But it all depends on what is your lifestyle going to be, what do you want to get back to, kind of a thing.
And what is your exercise age as
Exactly.
well? How long have you been exercising for?
True.
Like the
True.
founder of our clinic, Rishabh,
Yeah.
he's got no ACL.
Right.
And he got it diagnosed, I think, last year or so. And he's been strength training ever since. And he's running a half marathon end of this month or end of next month.
Right. Yeah.
So, and he's got he probably must have had problems, but he's managed to overcome it. He's doing deadlifts, RDLs,
Yeah,
squats. No,
yeah.
he's running 10-15 kilometers, no
Right.
problem at all. So I
Right.
think it is a very
It is
individualistic
very
approach. Yeah.
individualistic. Like today also I was speaking to a client, and she's a Zumba instructor. So I was, and she was just barely touching 40. So I was like, do you want to live the rest of your life thinking, and she didn't want to get the surgery done where she has a partial to full thickness tear. So I was like, do you want to get back to Zumba? If the answer is yes, then get the surgery done.
Hmm.
Because Zumba involves a lot of, turning, twisting. But so say if not Zumba, if I get into something else. So I said, see, what if you stop another 4 5 years, you stop your Zumba class. But what if you want to go on a trek, on a trip,
Hmm.
where it requires physical activity? You will consciously not weight bearing on that leg, and that will cause some more imbalances, because right now also you are favoring your uninjured leg, and you're not putting your full weight on the leg. So imagine this pattern goes on for another 10 years. So you're asking for early arthritis, you're asking. So if you're reasonably active, get it done. If you are not active, but or even in these deficient cases, are you willing to put that
Time and effort.
time and effort
Yeah.
to strengthen yourself to that level
True.
that you can live with an axial deficient knee?
Hmm.
Do it. Whatever
sense.
works for you. But I feel it is a case to case. Can't say
100%.
that, this is bad or surgery is bad.
Like I am treating a patient of mine right now. She's got LCL, MCL, and ACL
You're right.
all in one.
Yeah.
And she suffered that injury when she went skiing,
Mm-hmm.
and then she fell down, and then her foot got stuck in the ski, and then it just twisted.
Yeah.
So she came in to me saying she does not want to go in for surgery. She wants to go in for a conservative approach only, and she's ready to give up skiing as a sport. And I said, if that is what you want, I'm more than happy to treat your knee and ensure that you get back to all the other sports, and maybe skiing if we are able to accumulate that much amount of strength before that.
Yeah.
But the fact that she went for a conservative approach, even with having 3 ligaments torn,
Yeah.
and right now it's been 2 months, and she's gotten the brace off. She's able to walk normally. She's got no swelling. She went for another consultation with her surgeon, and the surgeon says everything is spot on. You just need to continue with your physiotherapy. It just gives me hope that there might be a certain time in the future where we will have to, where we can actually choose to go for the conservative approach.
Yes.
In a safe environment.
Yeah.
And
It all depends upon the compliance for rehab again,
True.
So
Agreed.
sometimes if you're not willing to give those 9 months for your rehab, even post-op, what is the use of that surgery?
True.
Anyway, so it all depends on how much you are willing to put that time and effort to get back.
Yeah.
Even with and sometimes, the body is resilient. Sometimes I've just seen magical healing happening, just things heal. Like, even if there is a partial to full thickness tear, sometimes it just heals.
Definitely.
And they don't need it anymore, kind of a thing. But yeah, giving a fair chance to conservative management, or even prehab for that matter. Like, anyway, it's an elective surgery. It's not an emergency surgery. So if you have that time, build up. See how it
Definitely.
goes.
Yeah.
If your lifestyle changes by then, and if you choose that, okay, I am able to function without doing a surgery, fine, work. The day you decide that you want to get an ACL surgery done, you are ready to get in.
And we are there to help.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But that compliance, see what happens sometimes, what I feel as a challenge, especially in surgeons around here, is that they explain everything about the surgery, but they spend very less time in explaining to the patient that 9 months of compliance. See, because that is a cost as well. Coming thrice a week initially to a physio, then maybe tapering it to twice a week. This accounts to around 40 to 50 sessions of rehab over 6 to 9 months, or even more for that matter. That also is a cost, for a regular patient or even an athlete for that matter. I feel a lot of time that conversation can be done having the physio, the ortho, and the client together, explaining to them that
True.
to get the best out of your surgery, whether it is or even conservative for that matter, it has to be this teamwork, and it has to go through this 9 months to sometimes.
A
There are some
year.
guidelines are also about 12
Yeah.
months as well.
I think with ACL rehab, it says, especially with return to sport,
Yeah, RTS says
Yeah.
12 months.
12 months.
Yeah.
And it says that every month that you
Yeah,
delay
now
with.
when you do, if you see the Asperger guidelines, they give you almost every phase wise what tests you can do
Yeah.
in terms of checking whether your rehab is on point and whether your client is able to cross over those milestones, and then they're ready to graduate to the next level of rehab.
100%.
And following that definitely can help you design your ACL rehab better.
Perfect. And we move on to the next one,
Okay.
which is, should you or should you not lift with your knees? And is your back supposed to bend? And is your back, are the discs in your back like a donut?
No, this don't come out, this don't go back. I hope physios who are listening to this podcast, please do not say these words to your clients, saying that the center of your disc is like a jelly and it moves back and it moves forward. Fine, at some point maybe someone was using these analogies to explain, but I don't think that you should educate your patients that way, saying that, see, there is no right way to move. It's fine, I will teach a perfect deadlift or a perfect squat in, okay, this is the lean, this should be there. But tomorrow, if you're picking up your child from the ground, or you're playing with a pet, or you have to squat down to search for something which has gone under your bed or something, you're not going to be in that form and technique and, lift or bend for that matter. Life happens in different planes and motions. So you can't predict that, okay, I was doing my squat properly, why did I get this injury? No, that's so. This right way of moving, or whether the back should bend, the backs have to bend, yeah, that's why they are designed. I mean, there is so much of psychological bombarding that sometimes doctors do. Don't bend your knees, don't sit cross-legged, don't bend, everything is bending, right? Sitting is bending, so don't sit.
True.
So, but we have a hard time educating patients and getting them to de-learn, or even this is actually instills kinesiophobia for so many patients, that I'm not supposed to bend. Like, we have patients who are saying that when my husband bends down to pick, his spine curves very nicely, but mine stays very flat. So, am I moving wrong? I said, no, you are moving right. Everybody is designed in their own way.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
just that, okay, are you getting any pain while you're bending? No, you're fine.
Forget about
Yeah.
it. Yeah. I think the most common cause for discogenic or disc related back pain, which I have found in my patients, is they tell me that they bend down to get something from the oven,
Yeah.
and then it just,
Yeah.
your back just catches,
Catches.
and then it's immense pain,
Right.
and then that stays on for like 24 to 48 hours,
Right.
and then they rush to the A&E to get it checked.
Right.
Like, that's the most common thing.
Yes.
So just bear in mind that if you train your body in a certain way to not bend your back at all, and then you do those certain kind of movements, you're
Exactly.
essentially putting more pressure on certain points, and then it will have some negative effects.
Yeah.
So, and that translates to sport as well. So I also practice jiu-jitsu as a
Yes.
sport.
Yeah.
In that, your body and your back
It's
is
just going to twist
yeah,
and turn in
yeah,
any way. Yeah.
with their clothes
Exactly.
on.
You're just going to throw and slam somebody
Exactly.
down, right? So the
So-
way it's all combination, like flexion, rotation, extension, rotation, which we say, oh, you should not do
True.
in physiotherapy.
Exactly.
These are all, pain-giving
Yeah,
movements.
yeah, 100%
This is how we've been
agree.
taught, right?
Yeah.
But we need to also evolve. We need to change our language. these are movements that are needed. If I want to reach for something, if I'm driving and I want to reach something on my back seat, I need extension rotation.
True.
I can't say that, oh, you have a disc, you cannot do this
Yeah,
movement.
yeah,
You
definitely.
The main thing is that we are training you as physios so that you should be able to do all those movements. So I hate the doctors who say, don't bend, don't sit cross-legged, don't do staircase climbing. Because of that, now if you see, nobody, if I take a, I think from the young physios or whoever are there, or if I go to my daughter's school and tell everyone to do a proper Indian squat, I don't think even 50% of them would be able to do that. Because who does it nowadays? We don't squat, we don't sit on the floor, which we would do I would do as a kid.
Even
So
I would do as well.
uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Movement is something that we need to voice for. We are doctors of movement, and that's what we need to preach and talk and do and be examples of that. That's what I also tell all my physios, like, do some activity, get into something, gymming, yoga, walking, running. Because see, if you don't do something, why will your client believe you?
Yeah.
So I just
100%.
feel that why runners started coming to me is because I was running, because she understands, what is movement, what is. That is also something I would tell each physio, that, if you are a doctor of movement, you also should move and do something. Get out, take a sport, do something. If you were a sport.
Ma'am, can you say that while looking in the camera?
Yeah. So if you're a physio, you are a doctor of movement, I would encourage you that you should practice what you preach. You should take up a sport, whether it's running, pickleball, tennis, basketball, volleyball, whatever works for you. If you were playing some sport in your younger days, revive it. Or even if it's dance for that matter. See, if you are somebody who's agile and moving and you are able to demonstrate your exercises to your physio, to your clients, they will believe you, because they will understand it. Okay, you can do it, so that means even I can do it. But if you are somebody who's still struggling with movement, you're not physically fit, you don't appear physically fit, chances of them believing you and trusting you that, okay, you are the right person to advise them, is questionable.
Perfect. I couldn't have said it any better.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
So that brings us to the last question. MRI. How important is imaging, and how much should you trust imaging? Because there's a lot of people that go for MRI, and when they see that they have got a certain kind of disc bulge in a certain level, then they get very fearful of moving.
Mhm.
So my question to you is, how much should you trust MRI, and how much should you fear it?
So when clients come to me, for example, a client has come to me with just an X-ray and not an MRI done. Basis their X-ray and whatever their symptoms are there. And for me, whenever I would ask for an MRI, it would be when I see any red flag, like there is proper tingling numbness, there is weakness. I would see that there is there is some sensation effect. Okay, there is some issue with the bladder bowel, or
All cauda equina syndrome.
all these symptoms are
Bilateral
there.
paresthesia.
Yeah. So I would ask them that, I think it's better that you visit an ortho, and if he or she feels, get an MRI done, or get an MRI done, kind of a thing. Same thing with the knee or shoulder. If any of the tests are coming positive, where I see a drop arm, and I feel that, okay, this could be a partial or a full thickness tear, get an MRI done. Patients who come to me with an MRI showing that there are disc bulges in maybe all 3-4 levels, 3-4-5 has disc bulges, and first question they ask me is whether that bulge will go back. So you have to break to them and say that no, it's just going to stay there, but you are going to get stronger and your body is going to adapt and be resilient and work around it. So I usually like to use this line that don't treat the MRI, treat the patient and the client. So if we first work on you, and even if you expect that after 6 months when you do the MRI, will the disc be gone inside? So don't expect that. But in 6 months, you will definitely be a stronger person who's able to adapt with those bulges being there. So It's all about how you word it these days to your patients. If you want to create fear, then you can use that. But yeah, you can just use it as a tool, that okay, it is just telling you something. Like sometimes, like if you are a diabetic, you are a diabetic, your levels are going to go up and down. Is it going to go away? It may, if you make a drastic lifestyle change and try to work on reversing your diabetes, or something like that. But if you're not willing to, you have to live with it, right? So you make those adjustments, you make your lifestyle, you work around your insulin, your medicines, you exercise, and you manage your sugars. Same thing with an MRI. Your disc is there, it's going to be there, it's going to be bulging, but yeah, your core is going to get stronger, your back is going to get stronger. So work around it. So
Definitely.
yeah, but I use it only when I feel any of the red flags in any of the joints that are coming positive. I would advise it, or I would send them rather to a orthopedic who can maybe take the further investigations.
100%. I think a few red flags for lower back pain, which I would definitely like to point out for everybody out there, is if you have got bilateral paresthesia or bilateral numbness, if you have got dermatomal changes or myotomal changes, if you have got reduced reflexes or areflexia, if you have got negative, positive Babinski sign, and if you feel like you have got loss of sensation of bowel and bladder, if you feel like your there's loss of sensation around your sexual activity, then I think these are the major red flags that I would point for lower back pain. Everything apart from that, it's very
Relative.
subjective.
Subjective
Yeah,
and relative.
definitely.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that
Yes.
brings us to the end of this section.
Okay.
So thank you for all of that. That was really informative, and we did go into a lot of different aspects about physiotherapy, which
Right.
brings us to the last part of this podcast, which is a rapid fire. I'm
Okay.
just going to ask you 5 questions, and just say the first thing which pops in your brain. Okay.
Okay.
So the first one is one exercise that you would recommend to running patients.
Single leg calf raises.
Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
One book or podcast that you would recommend to physios.
Huberman Labs.
Mountaineering or running.
Difficult. Mountaineering.
And one quality that is essential for any budding physio.
Empathy.
And that's the end of it. I just want to thank you so much for agreeing to this podcast and for agreeing to talk to me. And thank you for being on the episode 2 of Recovery Talks. It was really nice having you. And I hope that we are able to do this again in the future.
Yes, thank you for having me, and it's a great initiative that you are doing by getting the community together and spreading the word. Happy to be here and looking forward to collaborating in more ways.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah. So this was episode 2 of Recovery Talks with Dr. Shweta Varke, who's the head of physiokinesis. In this entire podcast, we delved into her initial days as a physiotherapist, what gave her those qualities and those values that ensured that she set up her own private practice and made sure that it is running smoothly. We also spoke a bit about physiokinesis and the qualities and the various aspects of physiokinesis and the services which it has to offer to the general population. And then we spoke about a bit about running and running injuries and the different aspects of physiotherapy, and debunked a few physiotherapy misconceptions or controversial subjects or controversial topics. I just want to thank Shweta ma'am for coming in today and for speaking with us and sharing her knowledge and her guidance and ensuring that we, the future generations of physiotherapists, are walking on the right path. Thank you.